Welcome to Halachot Purim. In today's class, we're going to see in the Sefer Chazon Ovadia by Chacham Ovadia the laws of gifts to the poor people. In Hebrew, it's called the Matanot le'evunim, like we saw in the previous class. When it came to Mishloach Manot, we explained that the word manot literally means portions. Since it's plural, the minimum you have to send it to. So we explained that it's ish l're'ehu, it's one person to his friend. The obligation when it comes to mishloach manot is two portions to one person. However, Rabotai, when it comes to matanot le'evunim, matanot literally means presents. But the same concept over here, since it says matanot, plural, minimum we're going to see it has to be two gifts. Le'evunim, since it's plural, it says the poor people in the plural language, so therefore again it has to be two people. By Mishloach Manot it says ish l're'ehu, it's two portions to one person. By Matanot Devunim, it's actually two presents to two poor people. And that's what we're going to try to see today, B'ezrat Hashem, the laws of Matanot Le'evunim. How does it work? How much does the person have to give? Can you give it, to a husband and a wife who are poor? And so on and so forth. Halacha Aleph. Mitzvah letet shtei matanot l'shnei evunim biyom apurim. The mitzvah is to give two presents to two poor people on the day of Purim. Very important line, dahainu, which means matana achad lekol evyon. Very important halacha rabotai. When it comes to the halachot of matanot le'evunim, it's not two presents. We'll see what the presents can be. It's not two presents to one person and again two presents to another person. No, that's not what it's saying. What it's saying over here is like this, that it's two matanot to two evunim. So two presents to two poor people, which means to say one present per one poor person. The second present for the second poor person. A lot of people get this halacha wrong. They think they are obligated to give matanot levinim, meaning two presents to one person, and then again give two presents to another person. That's four presents. Halacha says that matanot levinim, the minimum for matanot is two. Le'evunim is also two. That's why Chacham Ovadia says over here, Dahainu matana achad l'chol evyon. It's one present for every single poor person. So it's one present for one poor person. The second present also for one poor person. And you have fulfilled your obligation in the mitzvah of matanot evnim. Now, you want to go and you want to give more? Be my guest. I'm not telling you not. But I want you guys to understand where you have to go ahead and where you have to do the mitzvah, how the mitzvah has to be done. That's very important to know. That once you gave the matanot levinim to two poor people, you fulfilled your obligation of the mitzvah of matanot levinim. Okay, so let's just see that one more time. Mitzvah letet shtei matanot l'shnei evyonim biyom hapurim. The mitzvah is to give two presents to two poor people on the day of Purim. Dahainu, what does that mean? Which means to say, matana achat lechol evyon. One present for every single poor person. V'yotzeim yidei chova, and you fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim, ben benitinat ma'ot, whether you gave money, ben betavshel, whether you gave a cooked dish, or davar machal achar, or any other food which is edible, avalo b'kelim, but not with utensils, ube begadim, and not with clothing, v'sedanim, and not with sheets. Comes Chacham Ovadia and he says, when it comes to the mitzvah of matanot le'evunim, you can do it with anything, Rabotai, meaning money, food, or edible products. not clothing, not utensils, not sheets. No, clothing, utensils, sheets are out. Money, cooked dishes, or cooked food, or any other edible food, that's going to be fine, Rabotai. So we see over here, Rabotai, Matanot Levinim does not have to be given specifically with money. It can be given with anything which is also edible. That's if you remember in the previous class, in the class of Mishloch Manot, we spoke about over there that if a person went ahead and he sent out his Mishloch Manot to a poor person, he was also able to fulfill the mitzvah of Matanot Levinim. Why? Because you could give the Matanot Levinim also as food. So good, you gave it. But we did mention, make sure you give one more Matana to another poor person in order for you to be able to fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of Matanot Levinim. Because the mitzvah is two presents to two separate people. Or even when you're giving one Mishloch Manot, you're giving it to this guy. That's one. Okay, so you have the Mishloch Manot inside. You also have the Matanot Levinim, the one Matana. But now you have to go ahead and you have to give a second Matana, a second gift to somebody else. So if you would go ahead and you would give another Mishloch Manot to another poor person, we would tell you in this way you would be able to fulfill your obligation for both the mitzvah of Mishloch Manot and Matanot Levinim. And that's what he tells us. You are able to fulfill your obligation when it comes to Matanot Levinim, whether you're going to give money, whether you're going to give cooked food, or whether you're going to give any other food which is edible. Avalo bekelim, but not with utensils, ubegadim, and not with clothing, vesedanim, and not with sheets. Now we're going to see how much is a person obligated to give in order to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Matanot Levinim. Look, when you're giving food, we said you fulfill your obligation with that, with Matanot Levinim. But we know Rabotai, today a lot of people, they give with money. The question is, how much money do you have to give to two poor people in order to be able to fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of Matanot Levinim? So comes Chacham Avad and he says, Umin adin, from the standpoint of the halacha, dai benitinat pruta achat lechol evyon. It's enough to give one pruta, which is a currency, a very, very small currency, to every single poor person. That means, Rabotai, let me try to put it in English. If you went ahead and you gave a quarter to one poor person and a quarter to another poor person, you have fulfilled your obligation for Matanot Levinim. It's not, Rabotai, $50, it's not $100, it's not $1,000. You fulfill your obligation with Matanot Levinim by giving even one peruta. Rabotai, we have to understand, a peruta, again, I just gave you the idea of a quarter to say that if you went out and you gave it to each poor person, you fulfilled your obligation of Matanot Levinim. But you have to understand, a peruta is even less than a quarter. It could be 5 cents, Rabotai, it could be 2 cents. I have to be able to buy something with that today. So it's a very, very small amount of money that you are obligated to give to a poor person. Continues Chacham Ovadia, ובזמן הזה, nowadays, agura achat chashua kemo peruta. One agura is considered to be like a peruta. That it's a coin, is the lowest coin that you are able to go and purchase something with it. Today, a pruta is like the coin of 5 agurot. Again, these are all currencies that they use in Israel. So basically what Chacham Avad is telling us over here, Rabotai, if I can translate it into our language, is basically saying 1 cent to $1. That's the same thing by them. So over here, Rabotai, in America, what can you purchase with 5 cents? If you are able to purchase something with 5 cents today, then you would be able to go ahead and fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of Matanot Levinim by giving 5 cents to one poor person and then 5 cents to another poor person. Again, Rabotai, people are probably not going to do that. Nevertheless, let's save ourselves the headache, Rabotai. Who do you know that's going to go ahead and give 5 cents to a poor person? Maybe a tzedakah, okay, maybe possible. But Rabotai, let's say you went ahead and you gave $5 to a poor person and $5 to another poor person. You should know you have fulfilled your obligation in the mitzvah of Matanot Le'evinim. Again, you could do it with 5 cents, you could do it with 10 cents, you could do it with the smallest currency that there is. Nevertheless, Rabotai, I'm just trying to bring out a point over here that when it comes to the mitzvah of Matanot Le'evinim, it doesn't necessarily have to be a large amount of money in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Matanot Le'evinim. You could even do it with the smallest currency. Like in Israel, it's an agura, which is basically a pruta. 5 agurot is 1 pruta. By us, Rabotai, let's say 1 cent to $1, it's like 5 cents, Rabotai. That's it. But the bottom line is what I'm trying to bring out, that when it comes to doing the mitzvot, if you know the halachot, you know how much you have to spend, you're not going to get, Rabotai, cheated. You could give much more. You'll see the difference. Why it's very important to know that I'm able to fulfill my obligation with the smallest currency, because, Rabotai, what happens if I want to give more? Can I take that out from my ma'asarot, from my 10% that I give for tzedakah? Can I go do it or not? So that's very important to know. That's why we want to be able to know this halacha, that the minimum currency that you are able to purchase something with it, with that you fulfill the mitzvah of Matanot Le'evinim. Continues the Chamawad and he says, V'yireh Shamayim, and a person who's God-fearing, Yiten be'ayin yafa, he should give generously. He should give with a good eye. Ubesefer panim yafor, and you should give it with a nice smile. Rabotai, when you're giving Matanot Le'evinim, you should give it generously, and at the same time you should smile. Give it with a warm face, a good expression. V'hines charo ito. Rabotai, he tells you that the reward is going to be with you, and your work is before you. Meaning to say, the more you give, Rabotai, the more you're going to get rewarded. So we see over here that according to the letter of the law, a person is able to fulfill his obligation in the mitzvah of Matanot Le'evinim by giving the smallest currency in the place where you live. Nevertheless, comes a Chamavad and he says, a person who's God-fearing should donate generously to these people. Halacha bet, hanoten shte matanot leish v'ishto evyunim. If a person gave 2 gifts to a man and his wife that are poor, yatsa yedei chovoto, you fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of Matanot Le'evinim. Now, Rabotai, listen to this very carefully. A person went, for example, let's say he gave $100 to the husband. He said, look, 50 for you, 50 for your wife. Did he fulfill his obligation in the midst of Matanot Le'evinim? Yes. Why is this important to know? Because we would have thought to say that maybe we say that the ish v'ishto ki guf echad, that a husband and wife, they're really like one. So maybe when I'm giving to the husband, maybe his wife is already included. Maybe they're really one. Maybe I have to go and I have to find somebody else. Comes the Chamavad and he says, no. Whenever you're giving these 2 gifts, let's say in our situation, money today, that's what everybody gives. Once you're giving $100 to the husband, and you tell him, listen, 50 for you and 50 for her, or whatever the amount you're going to give, you should know you fulfilled your obligation in the mitzvah of Matanot Le'evinim. Ve'wadin, the same halakha is going to apply. Im natan le'af u'lev ben. What happens if you went ahead and you gave a poor father and to his son that relies on the father, meaning he lives with the father. You go to a father, you see the father-in-law, he's not doing well. You gave him $100 and you say, look, $50 for you, $50 for your son. Did you fulfill the mitzvah of Matanot Le'evinim? Yes, you did. What happens if before you came 2 poor people? Venatan le'oni echad, and you gave to 1 poor person, matbeye gadol kishur shte matanot. You gave him 1 big currency for 2 gifts. Shemechatzito yeh bishvilo, that half should be for the first poor guy, umachatzito le'oni chaver, and the other half should be for the poor friend. Did you fulfill your obligation or not? Comes the Chamavad, he says, yatsa, you fulfilled your obligation. So Rabotai, we see over here how simple the mitzvah of Matanot Le'evinim is. Whether it's going to be a husband, wife, father and son, even though the son relies on the father, or whether you had two poor people that came to you and they said, can you help us out? And all you had is $100 bill. So you give it to one poor person and you tell him, look, half for you, half for your friend. You have fulfilled the mitzvah of Matanot le'evinim. Rabotai, it's very important to see this again. Ve'im ba'u lefanav shnei aniyim, if came before him two poor people, ve'natan lo'oni echad matbei gadol kishur shtei matanot, and he gave to one poor person a big coin, meaning a big currency, like for two presents, shemechatzito yeh bishvilo, that half is going to be for one poor person, u'machatzito lo'oni chaver, and the other half is going to be for his poor friend. We're going to tell you, yatsa, you fulfilled your obligation in the mitzvah of matanot le'evunim. However, comes to Chaim and he says, aval hanoten shtei matanot le'evyon echad lo yatsa yedei chova. But if you went ahead and you gave two gifts to one poor person, you did not fulfill your obligation. That does not help. It has to be, Rabotai, two gifts to two poor people. One gift per poor person. Okay? Aval, however, hanoten shtei matanot le'evyon echad. But if you went ahead and you gave two gifts to one poor person, lo yatsa yedei chova, you do not fulfill your obligation. Very important halacha. V'yotzi'im yedei chova b'nitina lekatan evyon. Rabotai, look how beautiful this is. You are able to fulfill your obligation when it comes to the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim by giving it to a minor who is poor. Rabotai, if you remember in the previous class we spoke about mishloach manot. If you went ahead and you gave your mishloach manot to a minor, you did not fulfill your obligation. But when it comes to matanot le'evyonim, if you went ahead and you gave your matanot le'evyonim to a minor, you do fulfill your obligation for the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim. Umatana al menad lahachzir lo mehanya. Rabotai, very important halakha. But if you went ahead and you gave him a gift on condition that he's going to return it back to you, that doesn't help. You're not going to fulfill your obligation. For example, let's say you had a person, his financial situation is very hard, but he wants to fulfill the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim. Let's say he wants to give $20, for example. So he says, I'm giving you the $20 on condition that you're going to return it back to me. So as if I gave it to you. That doesn't work, Rabotai. You cannot make that condition. You can give him the $20 as a gift. And then if he wants, he can go ahead and give you back the $20 to yourself. And then if he wants, he can go back and give you the $20 to you. But Rabotai, to tell him, here, take the $20 on condition that you're going to return it to me, that's not a gift. A gift is once he keeps it. So if you gave him the $20 and now he says to himself, the poor guy has nothing what to eat with. I'll give him the $20, I'll do my mitzvah of the matanot le'evyonim, at least for one person. He goes back and he gives you the $20, not a problem. Okay? So that's what he says, umatana al menad lahachzir lo mehanya. And if you're giving a gift on condition to return, it doesn't help. Rabotai, we saw the same halacha by mishloach manot. We saw that if you had two poor people that they went ahead and they were supposed to do the mitzvah mishloach manot, right? So we said it's ish l're'ehu, it's one fellow man to his friend, but both of them don't have nothing else. That's all they have is what's in front of them. So we said let one poor person give his food to the other guy, and he's going to give his food to this guy. But if this guy gave his food on condition to take it back, we're going to tell you he did not fulfill the mitzvah of mishloach manot. Halacha Gimel, ein medekdikim b'ma'ot Purim. One should not be particular with Purim money. Meaning to say, Rabotai, we're going to see right now, if you're going to have a person come to you and stretch out his hand and ask you for assistance to give him something, Rabotai, you should not close your hand. You should give him. That's what he tells us over here. Eiler rather, Kol poshed yado litol. Anybody who's going to stretch out his hand to take, notanim lo, we give to him. Okay, Rabotai, so when it comes to Purim, you do not want to be particular with money on Purim, but rather anybody who's going to stretch out their hand to you to take, you have an obligation to go ahead and give. Rabotai, give. The honest truth is because when you're giving to them, Hashem is giving back to you. But if you close your hands from giving them, Hashem is also going to close his hands from giving you chas v'shalom. Umutav, the next halakha is going to speak about what is it better to do? To give a lot of mishloach manot, or to do the mitzvah of mishloach manot, but increase the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim. Comes Chacham Avad and he says, Umutav la'adam la'arbot kemeitav yicholoto. It is better for a person to increase according to the best of his ability, b'matanot le'evyonim. By matanot le'evyonim, milaharbot b'su'udato u'b'mishloach manot le're'av. Then from increasing in his poor meal, and when it comes to the mitzvah of mishloach manot to his friends. Comes Chacham Avad and he says, when it comes to Su'udat Purim, when it comes to increasing in the mitzvah of Su'udat Purim, or when it comes to increasing in the mitzvah of mishloach manot, by sending it to your friend, you know what Chacham Avad says? Don't increase over there. The Su'udat Purim you're going to have normal Su'udat Purim. Mishloach manot, do the mitzvah the way it's required to do. Send it to one person, maybe to two if you want. But the obligation is only to one. But when it comes to matanot le'evyonim, make sure you increase over there, Rabotai. Matanot le'evyonim, focus on the poor people. But unfortunately, Rabotai, we see just the opposite. Su'udat Purim, fancy. Mishloach manot, fancy. Matanot le'evyonim, you ask the guy, give me $100, he's crying. Why? Why, Rabotai? Your one basket costs $500. Why can't you give $500 to a poor person and go do something minimum for mishloach manot? What should I care? But what, Rabotai? Your honor. Your honor comes first. But what about Hashem's honor, Rabotai? What about Hashem's honor? Look what Chacham Avad says. It's better for a person to increase according to the best of his ability. B'matanot le'evyonim, Rabotai. Give more money to the poor, they need the help. Then from increasing in your own meal. And increasing in the mishloach manot to your friend. She'en simcha gedola u'mefora ela b'mesamech lev ani'im v'yitomim ve'almanot. That there's no greater joy, there's no glorious joy more than making the hearts of the poor people happy, the orphans happy, and the widows happy. Rabotai, that is the greatest joy when you are able to give to others that are less fortunate. That's what Chacham Avad says when it comes to the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim, mishloach manot, and Su'udat Purim. Rabotai, don't worry about Su'udat Purim. Do it to the bare minimum. Don't worry about mishloach manot. Do it according to the bare minimum, what the halakha requires. But when it comes to matanot le'evyonim, go out of your way to help them. They really need the help. Look what he says, Rabotai. Sha'mesamech leva u'milalim ha'ela domeh l'shechinam. One who makes the hearts of the afflicted happy, meaning these people that we spoke above, the poor people, the orphans, the widows, domeh l'shechina, you are compared to the Shechina. Shenemar, like it's stated in Yishai in Perek Nun Zayin Pasuk Tedvav, lehachayot ruach shefalim. It says with Hashem, He's going to revive the lowly spirits, and He's going to revive the hearts of the oppressed. Rabotai, come on. You see clearly over here, Rabotai. One who's misamech the poor people, you are compared to Hashem Himself. You are reviving them, Rabotai. You are their Mashiach. You are their salvation. Can you imagine, Rabotai, what we're doing? One who makes happy of these hearts that are afflicted. You compare to the Shekhinah. To revive the lowly in spirit. To revive, to relive the hearts which are oppressed, which are, Rabotai, broken. Come on. Look how important this is, Rabotai. Why is it so hard to take money out of people? Doesn't make sense. Rabotai, I'm Purim itself, I'm Purim. Rabotai, you're walking, you see. Baruch Hashem, B'lei Nahar, people have these big baskets. Go ask them to give you $100. Now, why? Give, why? Give, look what the halakha says. Who said you have to give such a big basket? I'm not telling you not to give. Give, do that. Listen, you want to have a Su'udat Purim? You want to have a nice Su'udat Purim? Have it. You want to give nice mishloach manot? Do it. But don't forget to also be generous when it comes to matanot le'evyonim. To the poor people, they also need to eat, Rabotai. Don't forget them. The real simcha is when we help them. Continues the Chacham Avad and he says, "Va'afilu ani hamitparnes min hatzedakah chayav b'matan le'evyonim." Even if you have a poor person that gets sustained from charity, he is obligated in the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim. He also has an obligation to give. Ve'ani shenatan pruta lechavero lekayem mitzvah matanot le'evyonim, ve'chazar chavero ha'ani v'natan lo pruta, shneim kimu mitzvah matanot le'evyonim. If you had a poor person, he went and he gave one pruta to his friend to fulfill the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim, and then his friend went back, meaning his poor friend went back and he gave him the pruta also, they both fulfilled the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim. Halacha daled, mitzvah matanot le'evyonim bayom v'lo balayla. The mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim has to be done during the day and not at night. Just like we saw by Mishloach Manot, that the mitzvah is during the day and not at night, so too by matanot le'evyonim, the mitzvah is during the day and not at night. And you should do the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim after the reading of the Megillah. Why? Because we're going to see because the poor people, their eyes are lifted to the reading of the Megillah, meaning that they are awaiting that somebody's going to come and give them money after the reading of the Megillah. That's why we're going to tell you that when it comes to matanot le'evyonim, you want to give it right after the Megillah reading, because the poor people come to hear the Megillah reading and they know after that they're going to get money. So that's what Rabotai comes to Chamawad and he says, you should do it after the reading of the Megillah, meaning the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim, like it was stated in the Gemara Masechet Megillah, in Daf Daled Amud Bet, that the eyes of the poor are lifted to the reading of the Megillah, meaning that after the reading of the Megillah, they're going to get their money. Halacha, hey. Matanot le'evyonim. Ein litol otam mema'od ma'aser she'adam mafrish b'chol chodesh. When it comes to the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim, you're not allowed to take them from your ma'aser money that a person separates every single month. Shekol davar shebechova eino bo ela min hacholim, because anything Rabotai where it's an obligation, it only comes from the mundane. V'rak im amar beferish, and only if he said openly be'eshit chil afrish ma'od ma'aser b'li neder, when he began to separate the ma'aser money and he said b'li neder, so therefore it never became consecrated. Ve'asha'a dechukalo, and the moment right now it's a pressing need. Rashai lated mima'od ma'aser le'matanot le'evyonim. He's allowed to go ahead and he's allowed to give from the ma'aser money for the matanot le'evyonim. So Rabotai, we do see over here from Chacham Avadia that the only time you're allowed to use your ma'aser money, that's only if your financial situation is not so good, and at the time when you were separating the ma'aser money, you said bili neder that you're going to give it as your ma'aserot. So now they do not become consecrated. So if chas v'shalom, if it's hard for a person to go ahead and give the matanot le'evyonim, we're going to tell you that you're allowed to use your ma'aser money. Nevertheless, mi shekayem mitzvah matanot le'evyonim kedat. Anybody who fulfilled the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim like the halakha requires him to do so, l'shnei aniyim, to two poor people, uberatono lo osim latet bepurim le'aniyim acherim. Now, willingly, he wants to go ahead and he wants to add, to give to other poor people on Purim. Rashai latet lahem mikesef maaser. He's allowed to go ahead and he's allowed to give it from the maaser money. So comes the Chamawad and he says, all this that we've been saying up to now, that you're not allowed to use your maaser money for the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim, that's as long as you did not do the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim according to the letter of the law by giving to two poor people. Nevertheless, we're going to tell you that what happens if you went ahead and you gave your matanot le'evyonim to two poor people like the halakha requires you to do so. Now you want to go and additionally you want to give on Purim to other poor people from your ma'aser money as your matanot le'evyonim to enhance the mitzvah, you're allowed to do so. Not a problem. And that's what Chacham Avad is telling us right over here, Rabotai. Nevertheless, mi shekayem mitzvah matanot le'evyonim kadat, anybody who fulfilled the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim like the halakha requires, meaning l'shnei aniyim, to two poor people, and now willingly he wants to add to give to other people, meaning other poor people on Purim, more matanot le'evyonim, rashai lated lahem mikeser maser. You are allowed to give to them from your maaser money. V'chein, and so too, im rotzeh lohosiv al hashiur. Rabotai, listen to this carefully. If you want to go ahead and you want to add on to the required measurement from what you have to give for the matanot le'evyonim, shu chayav lated le'evyonim, that you are obligated to give to the poor people, v'lated lahem matana chashuva l'shnei aniyim, and you want to give to them a good gift, an important gift to two poor people, rashai lated mehasofa mikesef maser. You're allowed to go ahead and give the additional from the maaser money. So comes the Chaim and he says, not only am I going to allow you to use your maaser money after you did the mitzvah matanot le'evyonim, like the halakha requires you to do so, to give to two poor people, but also, you know what I'm going to allow you to do? Let's say, Rabotai, for argument's sake, that you want to give each poor person $1 worth, for example, but you're not going to give $1. That's embarrassing. So what do, Rabotai? In your mind, you're saying that I'm going to give each one matanot le'evyonim $1 from my pocket, for example, and the rest that I'm going to give from maaser money. Am I allowed to do that? Yes, you are. You see, Rabotai, what Chaim is telling us? Basically, what Chaim is telling us is like this. You can go ahead and add to your matanot le'evyonim from your maaser money, not a problem. As long as you're giving the minimum required for the matanot le'evyonim, but now you wanted to make it important, you want to make it, something very nice. You're not going to give them $1, you're not going to give them $10. You want to give them $500, $1,000, no problem. Then you're allowed to take from your maaser. Why? Because you already gave the first $1. And that's what he's telling us, Rabotai. V'chein, and so too, im rotzeh lo'osiv ala shi'ur, shu chayav latel le'evyonim. If you want to add to the measurement that you are obligated to give to the poor people, Rabotai, the smallest currency is already 5 cents. V'lated lahem matana chashuva l'shenim, and you want to give to them a gift, an important gift to two poor people, no problem. Rashai lated ha'hosafa mikesef maser. You're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to add the additional from your maaser money, and it's not going to be a problem. Continues the Chaim and he says, Mi shemachal et chovo le'evyon. What happens, Rabotai, if prior to Purim you gave a loan to a poor person? He needed money, so you gave him a loan. Now on Purim itself, you forgave the loan. Did you fulfill the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim? Yes or no? Comes the Chaim and he says, Mi shemachal et chovo le'evyon. One who forgave his debt to a poor person, you do not fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim. Why? Because since now you did not accept anything from his hand. So therefore, Rabotai, if the poor person owes you money, and on Purim you told him, listen, I forgave the debt, you don't owe me nothing, you did not fulfill the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim, because right now you're not giving him anything. You have to be able to give him something. The same halacha, which is the Masechet Kiddushin, that if a person went out and he married a girl with a loan that he gave her, the Gemara says she's not married. Can you imagine, Rabotai, you give a girl $30,000 as a loan, eventually you tell her, you know something, I was going to buy a ring, whatever it might be, keep the money and marry me with that. It doesn't work, because you have to be able to give her something. You didn't give her anything, that's why she's not married to you. Even Rabotai, if the lender, he had the loan document on him, even if you had the loan document on you, and the lender forgave his debt to the poor person, and he gave him back the loan document. He said, here, take it back. You don't owe me nothing. Even so, even in such a case, we're going to tell you, you do not fulfill the obligation for the mitzvah of matanot le'evyonim. By you giving him back the loan document, Rabotai, that's not money, even though for him it is, but it has to be giving him something now that's like money, food, something like that. Aval, however, hanotena macha'a, check. If a person went there and he gave a check, le'evyon, to a poor person, even though he's going to cash it out later, I don't know when he's going to cash it out, you do fulfill your obligation for the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim. So therefore, Rabotai, we see over here, if the guy gave back the loan document and he forgave him for the loan, he does not fulfill his obligation. He's done. He has to go ahead and he has to give him money or something edible. However, Rabotai, what happens if you went ahead and he gave him a check? You want a regular person went ahead and he gave somebody a check for the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim, you have fulfilled your obligation in the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim. Halacha zayin Rabotai, hanoten legaba'ai tzedakah, one who gives his Matanot le'evyonim to the guy who collects the tzedakah, shu mechalkam la'aniyim bo b'yom, that he's going to distribute it to the poor people on that day. On the Purim day, it has to be distributed. Yotzeh yodei chovat Matanot le'evyonim, you have fulfilled your obligation in the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim. So therefore, Rabotai, if you went ahead and you gave money for the Matanot le'evyonim to a gabai, to one who's in charge of collecting charity, and then he's going to go ahead and he's going to hand it out to the poor people, the handing out must be done on Purim itself. If it's not done on Purim, you did not fulfill your obligation. Make sure you tell them it has to be done on Purim. That's number one. Number two, Rabotai, once you gave him that money and he tells you, I'm going to deliver it on Purim, you have fulfilled your obligation for Matanot le'evyonim. But Rabotai, there's a problem. If you remember by Mishloach Manot, in the previous class we said that if the receiver does not know who the sender is, you do not fulfill your obligation for the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot. However, this wouldn't be the case over here. Over here, Rabotai, even though the recipient doesn't know who the sender is, you still do fulfill your obligation in the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim. And that's what he tells us over here, Rabotai. Even though the poor person doesn't know from who did this money come from, nevertheless, the giver fulfilled his obligation in the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim. So we see that there is a difference between the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot versus the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim. When it comes to the mitzvah of Mishloach Manot, the recipient has to know who the sender is. When it comes to the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim, the recipient does not need to know who the sender is. Halacha achet, Matanot le'evyonim shenetenu le'oni b'Purim. If you had the Matanot le'evyonim which were given to the poor person on Purim itself, and now the poor person, he wants to go ahead and buy with your money clothing or shoes for himself or for the people in his household, or other needs for the house, the poor person is able to use your money for whatever he wants. It doesn't have to necessarily be for food. Even though the Matanot le'evyonim was given for the need of the meal of Purim, nevertheless, Rabotai, we're going to tell you, Mikol Makom, nevertheless, he's allowed to change them to whatever he wants. So therefore, Rabotai, if a person went ahead and he gave his Matanot le'evyonim to a poor person, we're giving it, Rabotai, because we want them to be able to have a better meal on Purim. But if he wants to use the money for anything else, he's allowed to do with it whatever he wants, and you have fulfilled your obligation in the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim. Now, Rabotai, we're going to go ahead and we're going to see the full summary. Halacha number one, the basic mitzvah. A person must give 2 gifts to 2 poor people on Purim, meaning 1 gift to each poor person, therefore 2 different poor people. What may be given? A person fulfills the mitzvah by giving money, cooked food, other edible food, but not clothing, utensils, or sheets. Regarding the minimum amount, how much does one have to give? Technically, even 1 pruta, which is a small coin, per poor person is enough. Today, Rabotai, a pruta value equals 1 small coin. Some say roughly 5 agorot value. However, a God-fearing person should give generously and pleasantly. Halakha number 2. To whom it can be given. A person fulfills the mitzvah if he gives it to 2 separate poor people. Examples: husband and wife who are poor, father and son, if the son depends on him. In both of these situations, you do fulfill the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim. But giving to give to one poor person does not fulfill the mitzvah. And then we start speaking about splitting up the money. One coin split. If a person gives one large coin and instructs half for one poor person, half for another, he fulfills the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim. Also, we did speak about giving to a poor child. Giving to a poor minor also fulfills the mitzvah. However, a gift on condition that it be returned does not work. Halacha Gimel. Giving without investigation. We do not investigate whether the person is truly poor. The rule is anyone who stretches out his hand asking receives. Halakha Dalet in regards to the priority of this mitzvah. It is better to increase gifts to the poor than to increase the poor meal or sending gifts to friends. The reason being is, we explained, and one who does this resembles the divine presence, as it says in Yeshaya, God revives the spirit of the lowly and the heart of the crushed. Now, in regards to a poor person, even a poor person must give. Even someone who himself receives charity must still give something. Example, two poor people may give each other a small coin and both fulfill the mitzvah. Halakha, hey, time of the mitzvah. The mitzvah must be done on Purim day, not at night. The preferred time after reading the Megillah. Why? Because the poor people wait for charity after the reading. Halakha Vav, using maaser money. One should not use maaser money for the basic obligation. However, it may be allowed if one originally said bli neder when separating the maaser money, and he has financial difficulty. There we're going to tell you you're allowed to go ahead and give from your maaser money to the Matanot le'evyonim, as long as you openly said that you're separating the money for maaser, but you said bli neder without a vow, so the money never became consecrated. There we're going to tell you you're allowed to use it for Matanot le'evyonim, but at the same time, Rabotai, a person has to be in dire straits to be able to use this halakha. In regards to additional giving, after fulfilling the minimum for the two poor people, extra charity may be given from maaser money. Halakha Zayin, canceling a debt does not count. If a person forgives a poor person's debt, it does not count for the mitzvah. The reason? The poor person did not receive anything physically now. However, giving a check to the poor person does count, and you fulfill the mitzvah of Matanot le'evyonim. Halakha Chet, giving through a charity collector. If a person gives the money to a Gabbai Tzedakah, which is a charity collector, who distributes it that day, he fulfills the mitzvah, even if the poor person does not know who donated it. Halakha Tet, how the poor person may use the money. If the poor person receives the money on Purim, he may use it for anything he wants, such as clothing, shoes, household needs. Even though it was given for Purim, he can use it for anything else. Rabotai, have a great day. Baruch Adonai L'olam. Amen ve'amen.